Greetings sailors and welcome back to World of Warships and another of my replays, this time in the French tier 7 cruiser the Algérie. This is in a division with Josa95 there, who is also in the Warships Cirque clan, and of the two of us, he's not going to have a great game, but it's mainly down to a thing that happens pretty early on, which is basically the bane of every cruiser. He's going to get hit really hard by a battleship, and so that's going to somewhat hinder him for the rest of the game. So it's not entirely his fault, and he didn't even pay me to say that. Maybe I should start charging. Anyway, so there's going to be a couple of things to talk about with this replay. I mean, I can mention the ship itself a little bit, but honestly I don't have a particularly strong opinion either way. It's a decent tier 7 cruiser. It's incredibly squashy, but you know, apart from the Miyoko, so is every other tier 7 cruiser, so it's not really remarkable in that regard. It does have a very good range, the fire chance is decent, the rest of the characteristics are decent, it gets a speed boost, but there's nothing about it that I really love. There's some stuff about it that I like, and there's nothing about it that I really dislike strongly, but it's not a ship that has engendered any particularly strong feelings in me either way. It's just a ship I'm grinding through. So this is a top tier game, and there are carriers in play, which is slightly bad for me in that I don't have a defensive, and the AA of this thing generally isn't that great, but never mind, we'll cross that bridge if we come to it. Meanwhile, well, the other thing I've got, the Hydro, instead of defensive, is actually now suddenly very useful, because that's a kamikaze R. That's a very dangerous ship who is being very aggressive right now. They have pushed really far up to try and do something about the ships that are advancing on this northeast flank. And this is a standard game, so you know how it goes over on this flank might be quite important, but we also can't neglect the cap circle too much, although there's quite a few ships coming over this way, so we'll see how it goes. So one of the other things I want to talk about in this game is RNG, because you know it's a pretty core component of the world of titles generally, and there we go. Yeah, poor Josa. It's going to be quite a big factor in this game. I mean, it's a factor in every game, but in this game in particular, you'll see what I mean. Starting with that shot right there. Yeah, somebody wasn't running the detonation flags, and given how dangerous a destroyer that was, that's incredibly useful for the team. Super bad luck for the Kamikaze R, of course, but given the torp reload on that thing, given the stealth of that thing, that's a dangerous ship. And it could be countered by our carrier, potentially, but our carrier isn't going to turn out to be the most useful player. So that's that dealt with, but in trying to chase down the Kamikaze, just because I was aware of how important it was to take that ship out, I have somewhat exposed myself, and here's going to be that RNG again. That hurt, but not nearly as much as it could have. And, well, I knew people were targeting me, but I took the risk anyway. And really what I should have done there is just held fire for a bit, tried to disengage into stealth, and then at that point manoeuvred my way out of things, because it would have been much more sensible to keep my nose towards the enemy, try and dodge incoming fire, make it difficult to get hit, hope that that Farragut stays in their smoke and that we don't get planes coming this way, and at that point make the turn. And that's a whole list of ifs, but it would have been slightly more sensible than turning broadside in front of battleships and then just getting lucky. Luckier than Josa did anyway. So yeah, RNG, I mean, you know, it's an important component of the game, and here's the thing, we tend to notice it quite a lot when it runs against us, like for instance when I get a 0 damage penetrating hit marker on a extremely low health destroyer, but sometimes we less register it when it works for us, and you always have to try and keep that in mind. You know, sometimes the RNG can be incredibly frustrating, but in the long run, it helps you as much as it hurts you. So theoretically, it all evens out. And it kind of does make some difference whether you're, say, playing a lot of battleships versus a lot of cruisers, or, you know, possibly other factors. But in the main, you know, you play enough games and it'll all come out in the wash, as they say. So we complain, you know, sometimes I complain, sometimes you get individual shots which just seem like such BS, but then you get to blow up Kamikaze Yard because they weren't running a detonation flag and you lucked out and detonated their, you know, entire ship from basically full health. So, swings and roundabouts, right? Now, what isn't RNG is what the team's doing right now. We're basically abandoning our cap. And because this is a standard game, that's not good, you know? If they cap us out, that's really not good. They do have some ships down towards their own cap, but pretty much everybody that's left alive, barring that Colorado, and I think we've lost all our destroyers already because they were around in the middle, and put themselves in a position where they weren't supported by anybody except each other. That Colorado is doing now the exact same thing. And it's leaving the cap more or less wide open, and I'm, with the sinking feeling in my heart, heading back to try and do something about it. And I've got the speed to do it, and I've got decent firepower, and as I said, I've got very good range, but this is a squashy tier 7 cruiser. So we are now back to the RNG. We're depending on not getting penned, and we can do things like wiggle around, we can vary our speed and course to make life more difficult, but especially against battleship guns, sometimes it doesn't matter and you get caught by a stray shot and killed anyway. There was a recent game in, I can't even remember which destroyer it was, possibly the Gerda, and I was firing from smoke. Somebody was blind firing into the smoke. I was moving around in the smoke. Most of a battleship volley went clean over my ship, nowhere close, but one stray shell fell short, and because I was extremely low health, that one stray shell that fell short was enough to kill me. They weren't even aiming exactly at my position, they were aiming over my position, but the RNG basically got me killed. So that was one of those times when it worked against me, and it was kind of annoying, but it was at a point where we just lost the game anyway, so it functionally didn't make any kind of difference. So I've mostly been HE spamming so far, and now I've got a squashy tier 5 cruiser to shoot at, or is that the... No, that was the tier 5, the Emile Bartin. Yeah, time to switch over to the AP, and the AP is in contrast to the York, which is my favourite, maybe second favourite tier 7 cruiser. I don't know, the Miyoko's really good, but I play the York more for fun than the Miyoko. And the York, you just, you know, anything over like 9-10 kilometres, you fire HE, which is unusual for a German cruiser. But with this, yeah, the AP is usable to longer ranges, but the fire chance is pretty good, so for the most part, I'm a dirty, filthy HE spammer, and it seems to work out reasonably well. Now, as nobody's directly pointing their guns at me right now, I'm going to make this turn before I get out of range completely. And Yosa, or I don't actually know if it's Yosa or Josa offhand. I cannot now remember. He's one of them funny Europeans, and it's not even that. I mean, obviously, you know, as a true Englishman, a Scottishman, whatever. Shush. I feel clearly that all Europeans are just a tad strange, but yeah, they can't even seem to agree on whether they're going to pronounce their J's with a soft or a hard sound, and it's almost like they're all, you know, different countries with different languages or something. Anyway, Europeans, silly Europeans, very strange. So, yeah, he's coming back to try and help, but because he's such low health, his effectiveness is rather limited at the moment. And although both this Leon and, what is that? That is a Koenig, are firing at me right now. Once they get wind of Yosa being here, it might be very tempting to switch target to him, because, you know, he's a low health cruiser, and I do like the York, but it is also very, very squashy. It does not particularly have good armour. If you can get in close, though, it's got nice torpedo arcs, but the difficulty is in getting in close. Unfortunately for Josa, that's out of the question. So the Leons backed off, and now I'm the one trying to close the distance to this König. I've got my own torps, and really I should wait until I'm very close range before using them, but I'm going to drop them in the water around about now, because if I do a super obvious turning to drop torps move when I'm very close range, I mean, you know, really this guy should just assume that I've put torps in the water and start moving around anyway, and this is just, you know, on the off chance that they don't. But actually, no, it seems like these are going to hit. And it might be because I didn't make a super obvious turn to do it. Some ships, it's really, you know, you just have to assume that they're going to. But the Algérie does also have good enough arcs and long range torps to work with as well. So it was actually the torps that got the kill there, and that might even be my first torpedo kill with this ship. I haven't gone to use them that often. They're kind of medium speed, decent range, but you've only got 3 of them, so by the time they've gotten out to the maximum extent of that range, they're fairly spread out. So I'd personally, on a cruiser, rather have, you know, either very good long-range torps like the Atago, where you can even, you know, stealth drop them, and they're powerful torps, and I think they're still kind of a middling speed, but anyway. Or I'd rather have a very, you know, decent spread like the York does, but shorter range and faster. Although not quite so short range as most of the Soviet cruisers have. Those are kind of like suicide range torps for the most part. So while I've been doing all of this, our battleships have so far not been very impressive. You know, our destroyers managed to all die very early on, so they weren't particularly impressive. Our battleships all kind of clustered over to one side of the map, and only one of them is now belatedly coming back towards the cap circle, the top tier Gneisenau. Honestly, I'm not sure if the Gneisenau is firing HE in this game. It might be that they are. I can't quite tell from watching back the replay, but anyway. My thought was I was going to chase down the low health York, and then suddenly this full health New York chunters into view. I don't know why. I don't know why they've appeared now. I don't know why it's taken them that long to get there. I don't know what their plan is, but it kind of foils my plan, so I have to back off. Fortunately, however, even though our Gneisenau hasn't been particularly impressive so far, at least they're a Gneisenau, and so they are quite tough, and I can let the New York beat up them for a bit, because the New York's guns are going to be far less effective against that. On the other flank, I really can't do anything to help. They're kind of, you know, on their own at this point. They've got to survive on their own devices. It's a Britannia and a New Mexico, and the New Mex isn't looking so good, but the Britannia's a bit further back. I didn't mean to look up how to say that properly. I'm aware I'm not saying it right, possibly, probably, but anyway, I could just call it the Brittany, in the same way that I keep calling the Gascogne the Gascony, and just be like, again, super British about it. Weird foreigners. Anyway, oh, there'll be comments probably. So yeah, we're back to like, my focus is just, it has to be, you know, here and protecting the cap, and you know, you can only do one thing at a time, generally speaking. The enemy team does still have their carrier left, but the enemy carrier doesn't seem to have been hugely effective either, although they have been putting their focus entirely elsewhere, so I don't know, maybe I'm being overly critical there? Who knows, it's hard to tell from a distance. They do at least have a kill to their name. So the Gneisenau just charges in, which, you know, you absolutely would do against a New York. That's not a fight you ever really want in a New York, but this New York seems to be fairly hopeless. Why the widespread of torps from the Gneisenau? I have no idea, and I think it's either fire set by primary or secondary guns that are going to finish this guy off. I'm sure it looks like that's HE, right? This is an HE firing Gneisenau. I don't know. I mean, they were there, but this would have been a much harder fight without them. But it's hard to say that Gneisenau is a good player, because that was about, you know, the worst possible way to like, I don't know, they lucked out. The New York was also not a good player, and one of them was in a tier 5 and one of them was in a tier 7, and so that was kind of like the deciding factor. So we are now down on points. The New Mex is dead, and there is not a lot of time left. Really not a lot of time left. This felt like an uphill struggle for most of it, and it seemed at this point that we're going to lose. I mean, that Britannia's low health, the enemy New Mex is also low health, but the Britannia's not that great of a ship. It doesn't exactly have high caliber guns. The York has just run away, although hello, there they are. Well, that's worth getting. It's not going to be enough points to put us in the lead, but if I can get that kill, that's worth getting. So this is a stage where that range comes in useful. If I was in a Miyoko right now, I would not have the range. If I was in a York, I think I might not have the range, or I might just have the range actually. The York also has a fairly decent range. So anyway, with this kind of longer range shooting, it's a little bit in the hands of our RNGs. We've also got planes coming in, so we know the carrier is, but there's not really any time to do anything about it. If this was an AA Spectre Gneiser now, these planes wouldn't really stand a chance, but well, I don't have defensive, so I just have to hope that he's going for the Gneiser now rather than me. So there's that York. Oh, well, plane could be better. And he's disappeared off the radar again. The New Mex is dead though, but they're still ahead on points. The Britannia's somehow done that, so that's great. But I mean, it doesn't look like we're gonna. Oh, hello. Okay. Yeah. So it turned out that last shot actually was rather better guessed, or else I just got really lucky with the RNG on the dispersion. I can't even quite tell. It's one of those things where, unless it was a super close range shot and I'd very obviously, you know, misaimed or whatever. At that range, with a basically guesstimate shot, who knows? I mean, you know, we had a very important couple of instances of RNG being kind to me earlier on in the game. Was this a continuation of that? You miss 100% of the shots you don't take, as they say. But even so, that was close. And I thought for most of that, we were going to lose it. And if they'd still had a kamikaze running around, would that have made a big difference to the game? Maybe. If I had been obliterated earlier on when I was making that rather foolish broadside turn, that definitely would have made a difference to the outcome of the game. So it's one of these matches where I feel like I played reasonably well, and it was my best result, damage-wise, XP-wise, in the Algérie. But I had my share of luck in that one, didn't I? I really did. That early detonation, not getting obliterated in the same way that Joseph did, and then just getting that final shot, which gave us just enough points to take us ahead. And we were barely 40 points ahead of the enemy team, so that's a pretty narrow margin. And, well, lastly, of course, I do also have to remember to mention the Britannia's kill on the New Mexico, which was equally as important as mine. Mine pushed us over the top, but if I'd killed the York and the New Mex had still been alive, that still would have been a loss. So in a way, this was the perfect trifecta of luck, skill, and teammates actually coming through, even though for most of the game, the battleships on our team were not that impressive, but the enemy team also had their fair share of not very impressive players. So, yeah, it all came down to just those dying few seconds. That was the decider. So, hopefully you have enjoyed this replay, and if you have, you can hit the like button, you can leave any comments below, you can sub to my channel if you haven't already, and, as always, stay tuned for more.